The Captain's Log Radio, with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and I've got an amazing guest with me today. A man I am so thankful to call not just friend, but brother. We're not blood brothers, but he is a brother to me. But before we bring in Scott, I want to introduce you to Scott. I want to get started with inviting you to head on over to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I've got so much content on all of those places, and you can tag along to all of the adventures at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We just finished up season 7 of the Captain's Log TV. All of the episodes, we are 70 episodes deep now, and all of those are available on our YouTube channel at the Captain's Log TV. And of course, over on Waypoint TV, which is you can download for free on your TV, your smartphone, any of your devices. So make sure you're doing that and tag me. I want to see your fish. I want to see what you're catching. I had some friends tag me, some fans, some viewers, and they are in another country, and they tagged me this week. I got to see what they're catching. I think that is so stinking cool. Stuart, thank you for tagging me, buddy. It was so great to see what you guys are catching. So make sure you're doing that tagging at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All right, today's guest is a incredible friend, someone who I bounce ideas off of, someone who I talk to when I take my dogs on a walk, someone who is very special to me because they had a huge influence on my life in the world of fishing. And his name is Mr. Scott Hennet. Scott, what is going on, dude? This is long overdue.
How you doing, Jonathan? Nice to be here.
It's so good to be here. You know, you have been around this journey, this adventure, really since day one.
Since the beginning.
Yeah. You knew me. We knew each other before I got my captain's license. You were part of that whole process. I got my captain's license. For those who don't know, I got my captain's license through Sea School. And in Orlando, they were hosting Sea School classes at the Bass Pro Shops. And Scott at the time worked there. So every morning I would go and see him before class started. We would get a break in the middle of class. I'd run to the fly shop and say hey, and we would just talk fishing, talk what we were talking about in class. But you were even there before that started. You were there teaching me how to tie flies. You are the reason I tie flies. You are a huge part of that story. And the first fly that you taught me how to tie, I don't even know if you remember this, was the gurgler. Do you remember that?
I do.
So let me give everyone the backstory, and then I want to hear your story and your fly tying and how you got into fishing. And that'll kind of set the stage for the rest of the show. But I got into fly fishing, and I wanted to chase a lot of these saltwater species on fly. Okay. And I was just out of college. I think I was just out of college. Yes. I didn't have a lot of money. I might have been in college actually. And I didn't have a lot of money, and I bought a fly. I bought a gurgler, and it was like, I want to say it was like $8 or $9. And I went to a spot that you and I have fished several times for juvenile tarpon. And I made the most beautiful cast. I mean, I was proud of myself. I knew it was going to catch a fish before it even hit the water. But that was the problem. It never hit the water. That gurgler, and this was like my first cast of the day, is the only gurgler I had with me because it was like $8 or $9. I was like, well, I'm only going to buy one. It hit a fence that was down into this water, and there was tarpon rolling all around it, and it got stuck. And I start yanking and yanking and yanking and yanking and hoping and praying it would come off. And there was an alligator. So some of y'all are like, well, dude, just go get in the water and get it. There was an alligator, like an 8-foot alligator, laying up right by that fence in the water. And I kept praying and yanking, and pop, the line broke. And I lost my fly. It was the only one I had with me. And I said, enough's enough. I'm not going to buy another fly. Instead, I'm going to buy a vise and material and learn how to do this. And you were teaching the class at Bass Pro Shops every, what, Wednesday night or Tuesday night, something like that?
Like Tuesday night, yeah, every Tuesday night. And dude, I know exactly where you're talking about, that fence. I can't tell you how many times I got hung up because it come right down into the water where the deepest part was, and the tarpon were always happy rolling there.
Yeah.
So you had to get it up in there in that deeper water where they were. But yeah, I've lost a number of flies to that fence myself.
And
It
you and I have
happens.
had several trips there. It's been years since I have fished that spot. I remember you and I and Sammy would come with us and we'd go fishing. Sometimes Brian from Orlando Outfitters would join us.
Yeah.
Jeff Kang, who we've talked about this week, he'd come over and hang out. We'd go walk around this area on foot. Most of the fishing we've done together has been on foot, and we're going to talk about that as well. You have such a passion for chasing fish on fly. And where did all that come from? How did that all start?
The passion for fly tying started when I was young. I think I was 12 and in a 4-H club. Now, this 4-H club wasn't really like a cows or chicken or produce kind of club. It was a woodworking club, and
Huh.
we produced nice pieces of small pieces of furniture and whatnot, corner cabinets and stuff, and we'd enter them into the local fair, and we'd always done real well. But when we weren't doing woodworking, one of the parents of the kids that were in the 4-H group that I was in would teach something, and we learned about. I remember learning about like remote control airplanes, and we did a cooking class one night, which I really enjoyed. And my dad, who was into what I call the romantic arts, fly tying, carving waterfowl, doing
Hmm.
some thing of birds and stuff. He was into all of the wonderful outdoor things that I kind of found an equal ground with him on, and I took to the fly tying, and I thought it was fantastic. And it wasn't for a couple of years after that that my dad took me for the first time out trout fishing, which was his love. We lived up in the Hudson Valley region of New York, and so up there, most of what you're fly fishing for, especially back then, was trout. And I think I grew to love it because it was the most personable time I ever got to spend with my dad. And that's
Hmm.
where it all started. Then I remember, I don't know if you were too young to remember, like the Walker's Cave Chronicles and
Oh,
Bill's
yeah.
Dance. From the beginning, on Spanish Fly with Jose Wahebe, and I'd watch all of those and go, man, there's just so much more to do than catch trout in little creeks up here in New York. And from that time, believe it or not, I had been jonesing for like getting out. So I switched up a little bit and I started carving custom little poppers and stuff for bluegill, and I worked up
Hmm.
to bigger custom poppers for bass, and when I got home from school, or even later in life when I got home after work, I'd grab a rod, head out to a local stream or whatever, and that's how it all got started.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Now, these little poppers, what were you carving them out of? Like wood
Uh,
or
Basswood
foam?
and balsa wood. I didn't know there wasn't a whole back then. We didn't have internet. You'd have to order a book or go to the library, you know. So I had to test. My dad was a carver, as I said. So I'd get into his wood shop and I'd trace out something on a piece of balsa wood or basswood and carve it out and paint the eyes on it. I had a ball doing that stuff and
Hmm.
tying them onto big hooks and stuff. Back then, we didn't really have the fly shop to go to, and even then, things weren't really as diverse as they are now for all the different species. Fly fishing was still, primarily for trout. So it was all kind of testing and trying and testing and failing. But I still have, if you go to, I believe it's still there, if you go to the Bass Pro Shop in Orlando today in the glass cabinet, I do believe I still have one of the originals from when I was a kid that I had
Wow.
carved and gotten, beat up by bass. I figured out what popper they liked most, what colors they enjoyed, and I, thrown this and banged it off of concrete abutments of bridges so many times the paint was flaking off, and they'd still hit it. And I'd keep fishing it, and I mass produced these and gave them to friends. And yeah, like I said, I still have a couple to this day.
Well, one of the things you would say in our tying class was, that'll fish. That'll fish. It might look ugly, but something's going to be, convinced to eat it. So it'll fish,
Right.
man. Don't worry about it. It'll fish.
What I found was the trout were very picky. When they talk about matching the hatch, you talk about, hey, the trout are all zoned in on one very particular hatch. Today, maybe at this hour, and in 20 minutes, maybe it's done and it's gone, and they won't be hitting that again for today or whatever. But I have learned that, like bass, you could, tie the ugliest piece of chewing gum with a piece of shoestring on the back of it, and them suckers don't care. They just keep
Yeah.
hitting it. I had
Yeah.
a blast.
Well, the first fly I tied in the class, because we didn't start with the gurgler, but that was the reason I got into it. And we got 30 seconds. So I'll end with this story before we go to our next segment. But the first fly I tied, and it's around here somewhere. I got to hang it up. I got my fly station is behind my computer here, but I took bass fishing and I probably caught 100 bass on it, little guys, and they tore it apart. So, hey guys, I got Scott Hennet with me today. We got a lot more to talk about. One of my best friends, excited to have him here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back.
Surfing, fishing, or crushing a triathlon? Waterman's high-performance sunscreen with Aqua Armor keeps you protected for 8 hours in water or sweat. Our sun care products are reef-friendly, fragrance-free, and won't run into your eyes. Engineered for athletes, it's sweat-proof and stays put, no matter the challenge. Trusted by pro surfers and lifeguards alike. Skip the burn at gowatermans.com. Watermans. Outlast the day.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. Got a great friend with me today, Mr. Scott Hennet. The dude is the best fly tyer I've ever met, and we had a great talk about how he got started in that, and we missed a few things, but before we continue, I want to one more time remind you, head on over to social media at the Captain's Log TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube so we can connect. I want to see what you're catching, so make sure you're following me so I can follow you back, tag me in your post so I can see what's going on. Scott, one of the best and something I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be super transparent. It wasn't always easy for me, and it's still not. And I haven't done it in years, but that's stacking deer hair. And that's one of the things that you were always just, the master at. Every time we did a fly tie-in event where you had to stack deer hair, it was like you were night and day different beyond everyone else. You're very good.
Well, it wasn't always like that, What's funny is I took it on out of embarrassment once when somebody said to me, look, I'm fishing. They were fishing the UK. I guess over there they fish a lot for these big carp. And it's a passion of theirs. I mean, they have competitions and they'll spend, 3 days camped out on the side of a lake trying to catch these big carp. And he said to me, we usually throw in like these little doggy biscuits for them. I guess they're called boilies or something. I'm still friends with a couple of guys that do that over there in the UK. But he came to me one day and he said, hey, do you think you could replicate something like this? And he pulled out what looked like a half a dog biscuit. and it was just a big old ugly, tan thing. And I'm like, that shouldn't be any problem. And I had some spinning, yeah, I had some spinning, experience down from classes that I had taken myself, but I wasn't a master stacker at that time. And I think that was the tipping point because I tied this thing up and I shaved it off and I handed it to him. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's like the best I could do. And I think out of being courteous, he was like, I'll go ahead and finish that. He walked away, and I know that went right in the garbage pail. So at that point, I was a little embarrassed, and I said, you know what, I've got to up that game. So I am at like the top 2%. And I followed Pat Cohen was actually somebody I watched a lot of and met him when I was up at the fly tying symposium in Somerset. I got to meet him and we talked to him for a while. But I followed his line on hey, the more hair you can shove onto that hook, the better. It stacks better, it carves better. We stopped using scissors and started using razor blades and things started really shaping up at that point. And I remember I took it in some crazy directions. I did like a turtle once, and I did tiny little alligator fly, and I did some wild stuff with that, but almost as good as like carving wood. Once you get it all stacked up on there, you could carve it any way you want to. But yeah.
Well, we would use that technique for redfish sliders. And then you developed a redfish fly that I have used and I have started tying. I've been tying it for years. And I've taught several people how to tie this fly. And it is my number one choice. If I'm going to be chasing redfish on fly, it is always the Sigmund fly that you developed, that you designed and taught me how to tie. It's just the way it sits, the way it moves, the way it reacts when you pull on that line. It looks like a crab coming across the bottom. And when you've got fish tailing, you got redfish laid up or tailing, or just kind of sitting on the edge of a mangrove or the edge of the marsh, and you make that presentation and you bring it across their face, they're going to eat it. They see it, they react immediately. And I have fished it all over the Southeast and caught redfish using that fly. And I can't tell you how many clients have caught redfish on that fly that you developed.
Yeah, that was what's funny because I think that came out of a need to come up with a new fly for like my 80th Tuesday night fly tying course. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I said, and usually I before that class, I'd break out a vise and just go through a couple of iterations of something that, I'd always wanted to try or something that, I've been working on. And usually I could get something concrete. And I remember getting up to like the last moment before everybody started showing up. And I'm like, I don't know, just take this cross-cut strip and palmer it on there and I got to a point where I'm like, that don't look half bad. Everybody showed up that night, and I'm like, this thing looks like an old sea monster from an old show that I watched as a kid called Sigmund the Sea Monster. And I'm like, it looks just like it, so that's what I'm going to call it. And I think at that point, the first guy walked in and said, "What are we tying tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah, I lucked out."
Well, a story of my own with that fly, and to tell you how good it is. I entered a fly tying contest at ICAST several years ago. And the judges were Renzetti and Mr. Renzetti from Renzetti Vices and Bob Klauser. Those were the judges. And so they set us all on this table, and you get all this mystery material, and all of a sudden, they hit the button, and you look at your material, and you have to figure it out. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I'm gonna do. So I tied my version of that with the material they had, and then halfway through, they got everyone's attention, said, we've got one extra material that you have to incorporate in your fly. And they came out with these orange teddy bears. And I thought, perfect. I can use that orange as a little egg sac in the middle of that crab's body. And so I got it all finished and tied it in, and then I turned in my fly, and I made it to the final round with that fly. Now, listen, I ended up losing the competition. I think I came in second, right? I lost. I'm second or third. Doesn't matter. I lost. I lost to a lady who's a tire or a fly angler over here. Her name's Marsha, and and I didn't care because that I lost. I didn't care that I lost because at the end, Bob Clouser came up to me and said, "Did you tie this one here?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He goes, "I really like this fly. This is impressive." And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, like Bob Clouser liked my fly that I tied, and it was your fly, your pattern that I was able to replicate. It's a tremendous fly and it catches a lot of fish. This segment is going really fast, so I do want to transition a little bit because one of the things that we have done, if you're just now checking into the show, listen, we're talking about fly fishing. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier is you can take a fly in so many different scenarios. You started saying you talked about catching trout up in New York. Okay, and people trout fish on fly all over the world, but we're here in America, all over America, people are doing that, right? And then you said you see these guys on TV, Flip and Jose, and what they're doing on the saltwater side. But I mean, I just mentioned Bob Clouser, who developed the Clouser minnow, that's caught millions of fish, I'm sure, right? Fly fishing presents so many different opportunities. Okay. I joke and tell people if you want to start catching less fish, throw fly. Okay. Because you can't cover as much water. But when you have the opportunity to present a fly to a fish, especially a fly that you've tied, regardless if it's ugly or not, seeing that reaction, seeing that fish look at your fly and turn on it and decide to eat it. That is one of the most fun ways to catch fish. Now, it's a very similar concept when I'm throwing my DOA plastics or if I'm throwing a top water plug and I convince the fish to eat. I like artificials, but it's just a step ahead when you tied those materials together and you took feathers and you took bucktail and you took this, that, and the other, and you created something, and the fish decided to eat it. I can't imagine how Mark Nichols feels over at DOA. They make 1 million baits a month. Can you imagine? Like, he created a bait, and they're making 1 million of them a month, and people all over the world are catching fish on a lure you created. I get excited about a redfish eating one of my flies. I can't imagine that, but there's something special about chasing these fish. Now, one of the things that you really love to do, Scott, we've got 2 minutes, so we're going to carry this into the next segment as well. You love chasing exotics. When I say exotics, be specific. Let's go over a list of the fish that you like to catch on fly and the ones you like to chase.
Well, there's 2 or 3 at the top of the list, and they all happen to be exotics. I really, really love the Peacock Bass, and I really love the Oscars. And I still think today the Oscar, pound for pound, is one of the hardest fighting fish. Like, he does not want to come to hand. He'll do anything. They're smart. They get you wrapped around tree limbs and stuff. So I think they're probably my number one top prey. And peacocks, there's nothing like the shoulders on a peacock when he knows he's hooked. They come out of the water, they head shake like tarpon, and they'll fight for the bottom, and they can get up to like 12 pounds here. So they are I think, the sports fish of South Florida.
To date, the largest peacock I've ever seen caught on fly was caught by you down in South Florida. And one of the things that we've always done when we're chasing these fish, and we've got less than a minute, we've done it on foot. Why do you like chasing these fish on foot?
Well, I didn't know I did. We actually, it was me and Brian who went down with a couple of kayaks because we thought we'd have to get to backwater. And we ended up pulling the kayaks over and walking most of the shoreline. But that's where the fish are, up on these deep canals, and they make beds and they cruise and hunt on the shoreline. So it's easier just to stroll the banks of those canals and watch for the flash of their fin or one of them sitting deep in a hole. But yeah, it just happens to be the easiest way to do it.
Well, listen, we've got more to talk about. We're going to dive deeper into chasing these exotics on fly right here on the Captain's Log Radio. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back.
Florida's wild spaces are calling. At All Florida, we're hikers, hunters, anglers, and artists united to shape a future where our woods, waters, and wildlife thrive. We show up at every meeting advocating for smart conservation and sustainable growth. Join us at allfla.org to protect Florida's natural treasures for generations. Be part of our community. Stand up for Wild Florida.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. Scott, that break, I tell you, every time we get into a groove talking fishing, we get interrupted here on the Captain's Log Radio. So we were talking about exotics. You mentioned peacock bass and cichlids. In addition to the cichlids, let's be specific or define those. You got the Mayan cichlid, you got Oscar cichlids. What's the orange one? I always go blank on that.
Midas. It's a Midas cichlid.
Midas.
We also have
That's one
Jaguar.
I have not taken on fly. I've never caught a Midas on spin or fly. There's jaguars down there as well. Snakeheads. There's also a variety of bluegills down there that look different than the rest of the Central Florida and north. There's so many different species, and we were talking about doing this on foot. One of the most fun things we've done is you go down to South Florida, and you can start in Fort Lauderdale south. Okay, and if you're driving down. If you guys are coming down and you want to do this on your own, you drive down I-95, and as soon as you start seeing that, as soon as you see the guitar hotel, the Hard Rock that's shaped like a guitar, you can start fishing for exotics. The peacocks typically go about that far north, but anywhere from there south, you can find fish. And what we would do is we would pull up our cell phones and look at maps on our phone, and we would see areas that looked fishy. And a lot of these places are landlocked. A lot of these, we would fish behind, in retention ponds behind a strip mall. We'd fish in ponds behind, in neighborhoods. All of these places seem to hold fish. And of course, the more times we went down, we'd find areas that were more productive. What helped you? Let's talk about setups, rods and reel size, line size for fly, and then what flies you like to use.
Starting with the rods, we used to go down if we wanted to catch some of the smaller cichlids, like the Mayans and maybe the Midases. We'd take like a 5. Brian would like to take a 4, but I always like the bigger of those species. I like throwing bigger flies, so I'd always start with a 5. Then for the larger peacocks, you want to have an 8. I think is a good rod to have because of the size of the flies that they like to take. As a matter of fact, my second largest peacock I ever took was a bruiser, and I was throwing a spider fly that was the size of my hand. It had so much on it, and it was super bright colors. But it was a deep diver, and you had to kind of almost jig it past the holes that they sit in down there. But yeah, I'd say my favorite rod to take down there now is a 6. I like a stiff 6. I usually use the TICRX from TFO in a 6 weight. It's got a fighting butt, which is nice to have for the larger fish. And that would be my go-to rod. So I usually, when I go down there, Brian will take a 4, a 5, and usually 2 8s. Sammy would usually go with like he's got a 6 and an 8, and I like to take a couple of 6s.
Yeah, if you are interested in the TFO TICRX, which was my first saltwater rod, was the TICRX. Fantastic stick. I have several of them, but they are no longer made by TFO, and its replacement. It's had a few different. There's been the Axiom 2, and now the Mangrove Coast. The Mangrove Coast is the most similar to the TICRX. It's a great rod. The Mangrove Coast is a great rod, and that TICRX is a great rod. If I'm not mistaken, that big peacock that you caught, and your wife was with you, I think you caught that on a 6 weight.
I did. No, I caught that one on a 5 weight. That was
Was
my
that on the
six
5?
piece 5 weight. And that's what made me so nervous because when he come to the surface and he rolled over, and I saw how big he was, I'm like, man, I am undergunned. But I let him go and I played him easy, and I didn't want to lose him. Funny story about that. My wife had the GoPro, and
I
I
remember
was
this.
like, we're hooked up. I said, so get this rolling. I want all of it on video. This will be awesome for a YouTube channel. She's like, I got it. And she's playing the high angle and the low angle, and she's cutting in, sharp and passing around from behind. She's doing. She could have put any producer to shame. And we got to the very end of that, and I let that fish go, and I was so happy. And I got home, and there was nothing on that camera. I was like, killing me. But I did get a couple of good shots of it, and that's one of the ones I have hanging in my foyer here at the house is that peacock. That was the most nervous I'd ever been with a fish coming to hand.
If you are going to target these cichlids, these Mayans, these Midas, these Oscars, I did an episode with Captain Josh Greer. We were fishing the northern end of the Everglades there in Alligator Alley, and I was using a 6 weight. And I truthfully, a 5 weight, you are kind of playing with fire because sometimes it's the perfect rod. Honestly, a 5 and a 6 is perfect for these cichlids, but sometimes you'll hook one of these cichlids or you'll hook a smaller peacock. Perfect. 6 weight, 5 weight, perfect. That 4 weight that Brian likes to throw, perfect.
Right.
Until, and you know where I'm going with this. A
Yeah,
lot
that
of
six
times
and a half
these
pound bruiser hits it.
a lot of times these bigger peacocks will get fired up and come and try to eat that fish that you have on that fly. And then it's like, oh no, you want them to eat it, but you just know you might break your rod, you might break off, you might not even hook the fish unless he like sucks it down and it gets caught in his mouth. But that is something to remember and to think about. It is always a possibility.
I like overgunning things a little bit down there because I'll pass up like schooly peacocks that I see running by, all the little, 1.5 pounders. I'll pass them up because I know there's a big one sitting down in there somewhere, and I want to make sure that I'm ready to take that one to hand.
Yeah, yeah. Another good thing to have while you're down there. Well, there's a lot of things. First, let's say if you're going to go to South Florida and you're going to walk banks, you need to be very, very careful of alligators. I remember
Yeah.
one time you and I, there was a group of us. It might have been the same trip. And we were right there by the casino.
Yep.
What's that tribe? Miccosukee tribe, okay?
Yep.
And Brian was, I'm going to rag on him a little bit because this was hilarious. Brian was trying to catch this fish and he just kept missing it. And the peacock, and the thing with peacock is, peacock bass is you've kind of got to annoy them a little bit. And eventually you annoy them so much that they don't want to just hit your fly. They want to kill your fly. And that's one of the funnest things
Demolish it.
about it.
Yeah.
Most fish, if you see a laid up bass and you cast at it and he swipes at it and he doesn't get the hook, or if he touches the hook, what is he going to do? He's gone. You're never going to get that fish to eat again. But peacocks aren't like that. They're very territorial. They want to sit in one spot. And if they're on a bed, even more so. And you've really got to make them mad. You got to tick them off. You got to just pester them, and they're going to swipe at your fly and hit it and hit it, hit it. Even if you're using the lures, they're going to hit it and hit it and hit it. They're not going to eat it. They're just going to like headbutt it and be like,
Open.
get out of
Yeah.
here. Yeah. And then eventually you're going to make them so mad that they say, enough's enough. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to eat you, fly, lure, live bait, whatever you're throwing. And it's on. So Brian is throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. And you looked at him and you're like, you have had like 12 opportunities. I'm going to give you 3 more tries, 3 more casts. And if you can't get this fish, my turn, move over. And so he made his 3 casts. He got 3 swipes, never got the fish. You walk down there, and dude, I swear it was the first cast, and that fish ate your fly, and we're all laughing. You brought it to hand, and we're just excited, and Brian's mad and kicking rocks and cussing you out, just upset. And then we're taking your picture. Do you remember this?
Oh, I
We're
do.
taking
I will
your
never forget
picture.
this.
And I think man, this was years ago, and I have lost phones, but there was a sequence of photos on my phone where you're lifting the fish up and you're smiling. All of a sudden, here comes an alligator out of the water try to get your fish and to bite you. It was wild.
He was sitting right behind. I didn't know he was there. I had the fish up, and we're getting pictures, and I'm happy. It was a good sized fish. I remember that
Yeah.
fish. And this thing come out of the water behind me and snuck up, and he was looking to snatch him right out of my hands. And I heard him hiss, and I turned around, and to this day, I'm telling you, I have no idea where that fish went. No idea. He could be up on the bridge. And I've thought about that often. Like, man, what happened to that fish? I'm like, I have no idea. But I've never scrambled up a bank faster in my life.
Yeah, and I want to say our buddy Andrew, a good friend of mine, Andrew Harrell, was down there with us that trip too.
It was.
And one of the funnest things about doing this, guys, like there are so many places for you to go and fish and create these stories, and it's really fun and it's really easy. Again, be mindful of the alligators, but when you want to take a break, there's these little Cuban restaurants everywhere. You can go to a bakery and get a cafecito and a quesito and all these things to eat and drink and hang out. It's so much fun. Scott, when we get back, I want to dive deeper into flies. We said a 5 weight, 6 weight, definitely an 8 weight for the bigger fish. We definitely want a floating line, a weight forward floating line for these fish. It might be beneficial to have a second rod with an intermediate line if you have some deeper water, but we'll get a little bit more technical when we get back. I tell you, these segments go by so fast. We got more to talk about. I've got Scott Hennet with me today, master fly tire, Peacock Bass, exotic extraordinaire. Don't go anywhere, guys. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. This is the Captain's Log Radio right here on the Outdoor Radio Network.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back.
Elevate your boat's shine with Stark Yacht Care. Our premium marine-grade compounds, polishes, and ceramic coatings deliver strength, durability, and a flawless finish. Trusted by pros for easy application and long-lasting protection. Based in Fort Myers, Florida, Stark redefines boat maintenance. Check out the entire lineup of Stark products. Visit starkyachtcare.com or visit one of the Marine Detail Supply Company locations today.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. Captain Jonathan Moss. I got Scott Hennet with me today. This is going way too fast. We've got Scott. We're just going to have to plan to do this again because we got so much to talk about. But focusing in on the peacock bass and the cichlids and the exotics, we mentioned having, if you're going to go down, be mindful of the alligators. Let's just get that one again out of the way. Pay attention to what you're doing, where you're stepping. You are near the Everglades. There are gators everywhere. This is Florida. Okay. We talked about having on the riskier side of 4 weight, but anywhere from a 4 to an 8 weight, you want to have those rods. Do you recommend, you had mentioned a 6-piece 5 weight? Most of my gear is 4 pieces, or I have some 2-piece rods. Is there any rod lengths that you prefer? I'm typically an 8-foot guy, but I've got some that are, I'm sorry, I'm typically a 9-foot rod guy, but I've got some that are 8.6. I've got a couple that are 6.6. What are you focused on?
I love the 8'6" rods, and I think they throw a short-headed, weight forward floating line very well, especially the size of the lines you want to throw for the peacocks down there. But I did break one or two of those. I had a predator that I broke and could not get another 8'6" of. They only made it 9 foot, so that's what I had to go with. Most of my rods are 4-piece, so they break down nice. My favorite, my little sweet spot rod is my 6 foot 5 weight. It's a backpacker rod that I like to have in a backpack with me at all times because you can whip it out for just the small. You get into some of the Mayans that you're finding in the backwaters of the Everglades. You'll see some of the smaller Oscars that are in there. It's delicate. You can throw a tight loop in between some of the bushes that are down there, whatnot, trying to sneak it in. But my go-to now is a 9 foot 4-piece, and I like to take a couple of 6s. I would recommend, though, if you are going down, if you're going to, you and I talked about maybe a couple of different rods, have them rigged and ready to go. The problem is when you're throwing these giant clousers for big peacocks, and then you come upon the sneaky little Oscar that's sitting in a corner and you haven't seen one all day and you're not prepared to throw at him. So having, a couple of rods, maybe a 5 and an 8, one rigged up for smaller stuff with maybe a Schminnow or a Schmicro, another one of my flies, and then something for the bigger fish.
And I would recommend have those 2 rods with you when you're walking, but have some others in your vehicle.
Always.
And have plenty of leader material, have plenty of flies, have a variety of leader material in different sizes. The last thing you want to do is to go down there on a DIY trip and need to stop fishing. You've got to run to the fly shop and pick up stuff, a new rod or more leader or more flies, or who knows if there's one even close to you, or trying to find a Bass Pro Shops or some other kind of retail shop to find stuff that you need or get stuff that you need. Over prepare. I tried, we would go down and we would tie these little spider flies that honestly were a pain to tie because they were little and you got silly legs and just you tied 24 of them because the last thing I want to do is to get down there and go, well, I'm out of flies, because you are fishing around structure. We opened up the show talking about I threw into a fence and that got me into tying my own flies. And I didn't have any other flies to tie or to throw that day. I was out. So if you're going to make that trip down there, have a variety, a number of flies and of the same fly, and then a variety of flies. We talked about clousers, bigger clousers for the peacocks, having the spider flies for the Mayans and the cichlids, tying flies, believe it or not, tying flies that are in that same color as a peacock, green and orange and red. They eat their own. They eat their own.
They do.
So having those varieties allows you to kind of hone in and figure out what they want that day and then catch some fish.
You're fishing such tight cover down there, especially down in the Everglades. You're throwing across a canal that may only be 18 feet, but on the other side where the fish are all tucked up underneath all of these overhanging branches, you'll lose 6 flies a day easy. So if you've only tied yourself a half a dozen, there goes your first day.
Yeah.
So
And there's rocks down there. There's one time there was a car that was completely underwater in the canal, and who knows how long it
shopping
had been
carts,
there.
shopping
Shopping
carts
cart
take
tons.
so many flies.
Yes. And you don't see it. And we talked, I think I mentioned this, having polarized sunglasses, because you're
A
not on a
must.
polling skiff. You're not up higher where you can look down. You're usually walking along a bank. So you
Right.
really got to be strategic, and you've got to be mindful of your steps. You got to be mindful of the fish. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad we'd go speck fishing. And we'd go speck fishing on a lake by our house, and we'd go underneath a bridge. And he'd always be like, "Hey, you got to walk up quiet. You got to walk up like a ninja so that you don't spook these fish." And it's very, very similar. We talked about, I mentioned earlier that these fish like to hold in the spot, but you don't want them to know you're there. And if you can see them, they can see you. So you got to be really cognizant of what you're doing so that you can make the right presentation. So keep that in mind when you're going down there to do this. One of the things that we did um, that spurred from one of these trips, I remember, and I remember it well. We were down there. I think that was the same day. It was you, me, your wife, and Sammy. And Brian was there, not Sammy. Jeff
I
was
know what
with
you're
us.
talking about, and I think it was Jeff Kang was there, Brian
Yeah,
was there, you were there, I were there.
and your
My wife
wife.
came down along because she had
Yeah.
never caught an exotic. I
We
know what trip
had
you're talking
just
about.
a tremendous trip. We had so much fun. And we were fishing so far south that we were like, you know what? Let's just plan to stay in Isla Mirada. And you had a little hotel that that you told me about, and we would start staying there all the time when we go down in the Keys. And we're sitting at the Lorelei there in Alamrada, having dinner, reflecting on our day, and thinking about tomorrow and the next fishing adventure, and our plans, and that's one of my favorite things about fishing is prepping and thinking through and processing a game plan. And on that night, you and I and the whole group were talking about starting some kind of organization where we could educate anglers on fly fishing techniques, not just for exotics, but for freshwater, saltwater, offshore, inshore, throwing fly. And from that was born the organization Fly Fish Florida. Take it away, man. Tell us more about Fly Fish Florida.
I remember that night well. It was a warm night, and the palm trees were kind of blowing in the breeze, and there was what looked like a fly in the shadow of the palm tree on the ground. And I remember
Yeah.
you looking at me, going, "You know what that looks like?" And I said, "I know exactly what that looks like." And we got talking about it, and I said, Jonathan, I said one of the biggest questions I used to get in the fly shop was, "Man, you have such a nice fly shop down here. It's filled to the brim with everything you need. Too bad you can't do that down here. There's no trout." There were so many times I had to explain to people, "Man, you are so far left wing on what really is going on down here in Florida." I think when I was living in New York, maybe I had 5 different species on fly. I come down here and I have pushed it to just under 50. And everything you stalk down here is a little different. So I remember having that conversation with you saying, "Man, there's so many people that have no idea what's going on. And we should really start some type of organization, a website, bring them in, shine it, and there are people who, this is the fly fish capital, I think, of the world. Isla Mirada is the fishing capital of the world. And you can get those species on fly down here willingly. And maybe the people who come down here on vacation or for holiday would like to know where to go for these particular. I'd get the question, where do I go for redfish on fly, or where can I catch a bonefish in Florida? And we thought that would be a good portal to kind of introduce the concept of what's going on down here to the people who didn't believe you could fly fish, and B, for all of the species that are swimming the waters down here, how to get them, where to go, what fly to use, what rod to use, all of that.
Well,
So that's how
from
Fly
that,
Fish FLA started.
Well, from that night, you were able to create a website, and you and I have had opportunities to speak at different fly clubs and educate anglers, and we both have a passion for educating people and helping them just get out on the water and experience the outdoors and experience Florida and all the different species that we have. And we got a minute left. If I'm not mistaken, you and Brian both have a list of the fish you've caught in your wallet, and you're always trying to add new ones to that list.
And he's still like 6 fish above me because he's been out and he's fished in open water on the ocean. I have not yet done that. I don't think I have a desire to do that really. But so he's got like, skipjack on fly. And I think maybe you've got a Dorado on fly. I know that, but I think he might have a Dorado on fly. See, I don't have that. But so he holds that over my head to this day.
Well, Scott, is the website back up and running? We got 20 seconds.
I'm working on it right now. A while ago, but fishing with you guys down south is the best part of my life. So I really that's where I'm at. I want to bring it back. So I'm pushing hard to have it. It'll have a fishing map on it. It'll have guide services and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to bring that back. Flyfishfla.com.
Thanks for listening in to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. See you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Did you catch a trophy yellowfin or gator trout? New Wave Taxidermy crafts museum-quality fiberglass replica mounts. Handcrafted in Stuart, Florida for over 40 years with lifelike details like hand-painted glass eyes, intricate scales, and even custom bases. Visit newwavetaxidermy.com to see stunning showroom displays. New Wave Taxidermy, preserve the thrill forever.